Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Pause Reviews Podcast, the podcast where Tim and I just wade through the depths of all your streaming choices to help you find something awesome to watch and save you from just binging another episode of The Office on Peacock? Is that where it is now?
Probably.
Who has Peacock? I do have Peacock because of Xfinity. I have Xfinity Internet, so I get Peacock for free.
Yep.
But if it wasn't for that...
I'm starting to become very guilty of like, oh yeah, I have that and I don't use it. We're paying for Discovery Plus now and I forget to watch it.
No, that's a mistake. Why Discovery Plus?
Because we wanted to watch Crikey, It's the Irwins.
The what?
Crikey, It's the Irwins. It's about Steve Irwin's wife and his kids, and they run the Australia Zoo. It's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, that sparks zero desire or interest in me. Although I do know the Irwin girl just had a baby, I think, right?
She did. She's my baby's best friend, according to my wife.
What? Now, with you, for all I know, your wife's cousin is actually was maid of honor at the girl Irwin's wedding, and you guys are loosely related somehow.
So in a much younger previous
you
life,
and the boy Irwin are Eskimo brothers.
That's so true. No, Carissa at one point, early on, and what do you want to be when you grow up? Really had an idea of being a marine biologist. So she has a soft spot for like wildlife conservation.
Sure.
So we stumbled upon the show. It's just really wholesome. It's really nice. In a world of garbage, it's just kind of nice to see them helping animals. And they run the zoo and the animal hospital, and they're just really positive, nice people. If it wasn't $60 imported from Australia, we'd buy our baby some khakis because they're selling like little khaki baby clothes now because of their baby.
For $60?
Yeah, it's something ridiculous like that.
Oh,
I mean, the money goes to wildlife conservation, supposedly.
And in the little front pocket, there's like a stingray stinger in it. No. God, we're going to cut that. Dude, so we're back. We are back. This is the first time we've recorded anything audio recorded, a podcast episode.
Yep.
Are we pushing like 2.5 months maybe?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, we did a couple of weeks of the video shows on IG Live. But it's been a minute. I have been genuinely nervous, like, all day, but also excited. So there's just adrenaline coursing through my veins.
So I mean, if you want to know our best laid plans, we were gonna, do the videos up until Frank got moved in
for like 3 weeks,
and then we were gonna be right back to it. Yep. This coincides with the fact that we thought we could, demo all of Frank's garage, re-drywall it, mud it, and paint it, among other things, in like 2 weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like 2 weekends and a day, and we still haven't even finished the first part of that project.
No, we did. We finished the demo.
Well, we have that part.
Yeah, we did. No, listen, you're spot on.
We did get that done in a day.
We did, and that was hands down the best part.
Yes.
The rest of it has been awful. So basically the initial plan was I was moving, things were getting stressful. You guys remember in the last couple of episodes, I was really like, I was having a hard time. And so we decided to go on break and just do some casual IG Live shows while I finished packing up, moved into the new house. I even gave myself like an extra week. I said, I have everything set up and we'll get back to episodes. I think we said we would air our first episode back like April 29th.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Right. And so here we are on May 24th recording our first episode that's going to air on like May 28th or 7th or something. Yep. And so everything... apparently, I'm a terrible judge of, here's the thing. I really pride myself on being realistic. right?
Yeah.
Like it to the point where it drives my wife crazy. I'm the guy, Alyssa will say, "Oh, let's do this." And I'm like, "Oh, but that means we've got to go get gas, go buy this, figure this out all in 2 days. Like that's not doable." Right.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when, people are coming to visit or people coming over, this hasn't been a problem in pushing
Right.
a year and a half, but still. And so I pride myself on that. But yet with this, dude, I grossly underestimated how long it was going to take. I mean, my house still isn't set up. The studio is just now at a point. To be fair, I ran into some major hurdles.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the computer and stuff was set up. I could have had the equipment, but when I ran a test run, the audio quality was abysmal because I'm in a new room and it is so different. It's an awkward shape. It was just pinging off the walls. So, I needed some time to kind of get things in order there. But anyway, it has been an interesting couple of weeks. We are totally not prepared for this episode, but honestly, I needed it back in my life. I have genuinely missed this hasn't stopped. We talk at least every other day, if not daily, about whatever we watched. Yes. So the show has been ongoing in private. It's been a podcast with an audience of 2.
Although I will say I have definitely fallen into the habits that we try and prevent in people, which has been like, I'm just going to watch What We Do in the Shadows for the 3rd time through because I don't feel like putting any effort into it. Or I watched all of Better Call Saul that I could find again for the 2nd time through. So I definitely need the
crave structure.
Yeah, the structure
direction
and the motivation. Direction, that's perfect. To start finding some stuff I haven't seen again, and putting some effort into that because things get a little stale.
Yeah, I would say though too, it is nice sometimes to get a break where you can. It can be exhausting when you're because we take a lot of shots in the dark, right? We roll the dice on things, and there are days where you just do want to sit back and watch that comfort food thing. Yep. And when you're trying to prep episodes and that kind of stuff, we don't always have enough time to do that because we gotta account for the misses before we find the gems. But that being said, this went way too long, and I think like you say, we're both ready and eager to get back to work and so excited to be back with all of you. And so for our first episode back, we're just gonna kick it off with kind of what we've been watching, what we've been doing, and treat this kind of like a rewind, and then just get back into the flow of things, and then go from there. So that being said, let's dive in. This week we're going to chat about a few things. We're going to talk about some Disney Plus stuff. We're going to talk about some of these Marvel miniseries that have been dropping in the time that we've been away. We're going to talk about Love, Death, and Robots Season 2. LDR, the first season, Tim and I devoured that. We poured over those episodes. We really broke things down just amongst ourselves. And we've done some stuff on the podcast, but that all came out before this. And season 2 has dropped in the time we've been away. And so something that we want to chat about there. And then we'll spend a few minutes just kind of running through a few little things that we've all been sort of wasting time with in the downtime. Oh, by the way, before we kick off, can I just say, I officially watched last night, I could not sleep, and I watched the worst movie I have ever seen in my entire life. And Tim, I have seen some bad movies.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's on Amazon Prime Video right now. And you know what? As I watched it, I think I had seen it. I know I'm off script, but we've got a few minutes before we got to move on. Oh, that's the other thing. We're gonna really try to keep the episodes to an hour now. It's Driven. It's called Driven. Have you seen this movie? It's from the 2000s, like the early 2000s maybe. Sylvester Stallone, the kid from Remember the Titans who plays Sunshine, the quarterback who transfers to TC Williams. Whose name I don't know. Estella Warren. Do you remember when she was almost a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Till Schweiger, I think is his
Uh-huh.
name, the guy from
Yep.
Inglorious Bastards.
Yep. Yep.
Anyways, it's like a Formula One movie, and the kid from Remember the Titans is this rookie guy. Till plays, the old vet, and then Sly is the old washed up racer who they bring in to mentor the kid. Burt Reynolds is
Yeah.
in it. Gina Gershon is in it. Like, there are some people. It is absolute trash.
What
Like,
is this?
listen, I can't even the random party scenes, the music, and Sly wrote it. Right? Like, Sly wrote
Crazy.
Rocky, Creed. Like, he's a good writer. I'm not saying he's a great actor. I'm not saying all of his stuff is excellent.
And chock full of cameos from actual drivers
and
race techs. Oh my god.
Now, Sly is famous for, like, he writes, one day he woke up, he's like, oh man, it'd be cool to go sit in a Formula One car. I'll write a movie about it and sell it, and I'll have to star in it, and I'll get to meet all these guys, right? Because he really fancies himself like a proper athlete. And anyways, but the movie is all over the place. It is awful. I highly recommend everybody watch it on Amazon Prime, just so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh god, it sounds and looks terrible.
Dude, I would love to hear from anybody who loves this movie or even likes it, just to try to understand. Like, Days of Thunder is bad enough, right? But that's like a great guilty pleasure type movie. This movie can't even do that. It's not even on the list. I just had to put it out there because I just had to talk about it. I feel like I had to unload this burden. And I would love, Tim, you have to watch it. You have to tell me next time that we record, which will be a couple of weeks from now, because we've got a few in the can. But we've got to see. I got to know what you think. And people gotta. I want to hear from listeners if you've seen the movie Driven, or go to Amazon Prime Video, watch it. Please tell me what you think. It is awful. Anyways, all right, let's jump in. What do we want to start with? Do we want to start with LDR, or do we want to start with Disney Plus?
Let's start with the superhero stuff. All
right.
I was in a little bit of a superhero kick because we were going to do a live stream where we were going to kind of go down the Justice League Zack Snyder.
Oh yeah, that's still going to happen.
Yeah, so I did find myself in a little bit of a superhero rabbit hole, which is big for me because I did get through Batman versus Superman and then the Whedon cut of Justice League. So we'll save those for another time. But Carissa came to me and she was like, hey, what's the deal with this WandaVision? She started watching something on Facebook TV, because they have their own shows, that Elizabeth Olsen was in. And she, like, is a Mary-Kate and Ashley, like, fangirl from, like, back in the day, because she, we kind of grew up with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
you're not that much younger than me, and yet we constantly find you're a year younger than me,
I
Tim.
know. Yeah.
Like, I feel like I was too old for Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen.
Well, so
you mean like when they were in like New York Minute or It Takes Two?
Well, some of that, I think. Well, and I'm talking mainly for Carissa at this point, but like,
right.
we grew up on Full House, obviously, like that was around the time.
Sure.
But then she was babysitting and stuff like that, and she has a much more innocent taste in shows around our younger ages than
she
than
skews
we do.
Towards the younger movies.
Yeah. So she always really liked them growing up, and then she found the show with Elizabeth Olsen, and then wanted to know about WandaVision, and I was like, I'll tell you what I know, which is what I've read, but this is literally the last show I ever thought you would bring to my attention to want to watch. So I think the first night we sat down to watch it, and like I knew the gist of it. I knew that they were, from the Marvel Universe. I knew that and what intrigued me about it was the ode to television, right?
Yes.
And so I was like, I think I can kind of get behind this. And a lot of this has to do with Disney's marketing. Like, it was everywhere. The clips were everywhere. And I thought they did a good job with the marketing to kind of make it a mass appeal. So the first night we sit down to watch it, and I think I texted you, I was like, so WandaVision. If we're going to watch this, how lost are we going to be? And I think your first response was very.
Which, I mean, I think is fair. If you're talking
Yes.
about the actual Marvel content of the show, which,
Yes.
and I think I remember, I probably texted you like 10,000 words about, okay, the snap has happened. Do you know what the snap is? Then this, and the blip, and the that, and the blah, 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 blah.
We were okay. Like, I it was some of it when she would ask more detailed questions that I knew were bigger than that, and I'd be like, I'm sort of feeling my way through this, like, because I'm enough up on pop culture that I know the vein of things and I know the big events. But then we start talking about motivations for characters, and I'm like, But that said, coming from an outside perspective, I really enjoyed the show.
That's fascinating, yeah.
And she even turned to me, she's like, so are the rest of the Marvel movies like this? Because I thought this was a lot of fun, but it also wasn't heavy on the superhero stuff. And I was like, well, what do you think? The rest of them are very heavy on the superhero stuff.
Right.
And not as much into the kind of fun, quirky comedy that a lot of these episodes were.
Right.
So as far as appealing to a broader, never seen a Marvel movie audience, it actually did a really good job. And it was really enjoyable to watch those episodes and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I come to it from the flip side of that coin.
Exactly.
Which is having seen every single Marvel movie. Now, I do not tout myself to be a Marvel expert. In fact, I just did, and we're going to get to this in a second, but I just watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier with my cousin, right? We were watching it over teleplay or whatever it is. Yeah. And he is well versed in the comics, in the backstories and the lore and just everything that fuels this content. Yeah. Admittedly, my entire experience with Marvel, I would say, besides X-Men or things like that here and there that I watched or read as a kid, but in terms of the cinematic universe, it comes solely from the movies. I have very little background knowledge from any of the source material, right? So, there's plenty of things, Easter eggs, characters, whatever, where even I would go to my cousin and be like, yo, Steven, who's this person? Or why is this, canon? And he would explain to me whatever. But coming from just the cinematic universe, seeing all the movies, whatever, WandaVision, for me, it was both a disappointment and really enjoyable. And I know that feels like a bit of a cop-out, but because I feel like WandaVision was two things in one. Right? Sure. It is part of the MCU, and as part of the MCU, I felt like it was less than, right?
Okay.
And a lot of what I had talked to you about was, the things that you may or may not understand are what makes the Marvel movies and superhero movies in general so good is amazing character development. And these stories are really emotional human stories masquerading as superheroes, right? The superhero element is just, the icing on the cake, but the meat behind it is really these human stories. And what makes them so good is how can you tell such a human story with non-humans? It's fascinating. And so a big part of that we discussed was the relationship between Wanda and Vision, right? This love that they had, this horrific thing they had to experience together, but mainly Wanda, which has driven her in where we find her now. Yeah. And I think I just explained that simply to you by saying, imagine that you killed your wife. Right. And then this guy brought her back to life to kill her in front of you again, right? And that your pain did nothing to prevent the great pain that was coming. But yet also, then you blip, and like one of the greatest scenes is that when Wanda blips in the snap, is almost a look of relief. Like, I don't have to live with this. And now she has suddenly found herself back, living with this again. And it's, so there's a lot of that there that I think I don't know that I was fully satisfied with the Marvel story of WandaVision. I'm not, towards the end it got pretty good and interesting, but it all kind of felt B Squad. It all kind of felt, which, considering that both Wanda and Vision were in it, it felt less than.
Well, and I think what I would feel from that, given the story, is that, she's trying to escape that larger universe, right? To a degree. And so it almost feels like it's in some ways it's outside of that, because it's like, how distant can we be? I mean, she's isolated herself, right, in this town. And even I feel like for the first couple episodes made an effort not to use her magic, right? It was like, we're going to try and do things normally. And so you're almost burying the superhero elements of it, right? For a lot of the earlier episodes. And again, that's why Carissa liked it, because and then even when it does, it almost borderlines more on a supernatural elements, because she's a witch and she ends up battling another witch. And so even when you're introducing that kind of fun superhero-esque stuff to it, it's still not blatantly superhero.
And I think that very thing is what allows the second part of what WandaVision is to really shine. And I think it's what maybe, I don't want to speak for you, but I think it's what you guys found really enjoyable. And it's what I also found really enjoyable, which was this love story, this love song to television.
Yeah.
And the history of television, and each episode is done in the style of a very definitive sitcom of a decade, right? So we start with like Dick Van Dyke, and we move into, kind of like the Wonder Years type stuff, and then into like Malcolm in the Middle, and into, and there's a lot in between, and I'm skipping a bunch. It's just whatever comes to mind. And they are impeccably shot. Like, it feels my favorite. You talked about Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen in Full House, but there's the episode that is kind of like Full House, Step by Step, those, TGIF years where, it was the music and the parents are like, oh, sit down, kids. Dad is really, and it was on a very special, blah, 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 and it was, and they did it beautifully. So even if the content from the Marvel perspective felt less than, the storytelling was sensational, and it totally carried me through any disappointment I had, and it seems like it carried you through any ignorance that you had.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun to see, and then go back afterwards, what each episode really was. And I think I was pretty close for most of them. I didn't realize that some of them sort of straddle the line a little bit, or maybe would subtly change through the episode. But it's like, they did a great job of making the sets very evocative of what they were. Like, clearly this episode was the Brady Bunch, right? The way the stairs were, and just the way the rooms were set up. Their clothes were perfect. The only thing I think in that episode could have been better if Vision had hair and given him like the Mike Brady perm would have been awesome.
Right.
But even just the situations that they find themselves in, like I think the first or second episode is they're cooking dinner for Vision's boss. Like,
that's like the Dick Van Dyke episode.
Yeah, totally out of Dick Van Dyke or Bewitched or something like that.
Yes.
Like, 100%. And so it was really, I mean, like you said, I grew up watching those. I fall asleep to TV Land and Nick at Night all of that stuff. So just to see that, and done well where it wasn't cheesy and it worked really, really well for the episodes, was a lot of fun. And it did carry me through that ignorance, where, we could just know enough to keep us going. And it was funny. A lot of it was so funny.
Absolutely.
I think the funniest moment for me was later in the episode, or later in the season, Wanda's expanding the perimeter of her bubble, right? Her sphere of influence over the surrounding areas. And it's taken over the sword camp. And as the people in the sword camp are getting sucked into her magic, they turn into a circus, and clowns and all these soldiers like snap into clowns. It was hilarious. I thought it was so funny. But it just had these moments where they were just a lot of fun. There was a Halloween episode, a holiday special episode for Halloween, which was great. So I mean, I think if you're hesitant because you're like, oh, I haven't seen, any Marvel stuff, a little bit of background research, I think you can get through it really well.
Yeah, and if nothing else, there is something to appreciate and enjoy because it is really well done. It is one of the mini-series that Marvel was putting out that I was looking forward to the least. And I was really, really surprised with how much I enjoyed it, despite being a little bit disappointed in some of the storyline elements themselves. There's just a part of you sometimes that just says the Infinity Saga was brilliant. Like, let's let these characters go and move on, with other things. But no, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't skip it, and I loved it. And I think that feeds in, well too. Just to touch on briefly, Falcon and the Winter Soldier as a point of contrast. Mm-hmm. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is very much is approached in a much more cinematic way. Yeah. Right. And you haven't seen this one yet.
Yeah. But it is. I didn't think it would be worth it for us to try and figure that one out.
Well, and I think again with a little bit of research, you could, because you essentially, it's like Cap is not here anymore, right? Captain America is no more, right? It's unclear. Is he dead? Is he gone? Is he here? Is he there? And I kind of like that they leave that up to the imagination. We as an audience have never seen him actually die, right? We've seen him grow old and whatever, but we haven't seen him die. So where's Cap? I don't know. The mantle now needs to move on. And so you kind of come into it. You could enter this story fresh because you just operate with that assumption, and now you're just seeing who's going to be next, right? Yeah. I think it does a great job at being accessible to new audiences coming into the MCU late. I don't know how many there are. Like, if anything, people are heading out. Like, we're all set. But it is much more cinematic. It is big sequences, big fight scenes, big storylines that really tie into a history, right? And it's great in what it is. Again, I feel like there are characters and moments where things just don't quite pay off. There's this one character in Falcon and Winter Soldier, a soldier whose name I can't even think of, and we meet him in the very first episode, and he's kind of helping out Sam Falcon, do some stuff, some Falcon stuff, and we see him like one other time midway through, and then he kind of pops up at the end to the point where when you see him in the last episode, you're like, you were absolutely pointless. Why are you in this show? You contributed nothing. Like, you could have been a robot. Like, you could have been a phone call.
He's that guy who shows up at the last day of your group project and takes credit for everything.
I guess, yeah. Except, I don't know. I feel like this dude was just like, look, I don't deserve any of it. Like, it's fine. And so, anyways. But that being said, it's much more a continuation of the story. While accessible to new people, it furthers the narrative that we've all watched through the Infinity Saga, which I think is the opposite approach, but also successfully done. It's really watchable. I would argue, ironically enough, for me, the more compelling storyline was Winter Soldier. I think he's just a much more complex, troubled, darker character who I think his redemption process pays off a bit more. Whereas the Falcons really focuses much more on the social justice and all that kind of stuff that we're as a nation and as a world going through right now, which is so important. And I think the representation is important. But, I will say that also does make it a little bit harder to watch, simply because this is not the show that you pick up when you want to get away. Right? This is not where you get lost into a world, you immerse yourself in something different to escape your reality and the day-to-day world. This is something that you watch when you kind of want to dive into that stuff, because the storyline really centers heavily on that. So I would give that sort of heads up, not as a caution to steer anyone away, because I think it's really well done. But if you're looking for something that sort of takes you out of the news, this ain't it. But if you want something that addresses that head on in a great way and in an empowering way, this will scratch that itch. So I do put that out there, because it's not, it ain't WandaVision,
Yeah, well, and I think there's something to be said for that. A lot of people, I've seen people talking about needing more of that sitcom element in their lives right now, because it's, reality is pretty difficult to live in at the moment. So
yeah, I mean, I've definitely found myself in that boat.
Yeah,
many a nights, doing exactly what we try not to do.
Right.
Yeah, I am just powering through Rules of Engagement on Stars right now.
Yeah.
That show's just simple.
Yeah, it's easy just to turn your brain off.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, a massive testament to what Disney has done in making these things accessible, in making them entertaining and engaging, while also, furthering storylines, and you can and you could take it or leave it, right?
Yeah.
You sort of, it is what it is. It doesn't, if you jump into the next phase 5 or whatever the thing is going to be, I don't think not seeing these, if you just kind of want to move on, is going to cost you much.
Well, and I think they've done a good job with that with Mandalorian too, right? Like, yes. I don't know that you need a ton of Star Wars knowledge to come into the Mandalorian, and you can sort of take it or leave it. And I don't even think, yes, there's going to be some spin-off-esque shows coming from the Mandalorian, but even then, I don't think it's a must watch if you're just in the major cinematic Star Wars universe.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think it's worth a watch. I think it says a lot that you enjoyed it and Carissa enjoyed it, and so yeah, man. The WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Marvel miniseries that are airing now. Loki comes out next. And so if these two are precursors and tell us anything, it's that I think these are all going to be worth a watch. I think these are definitely worth a watch.
Cool.
So yeah, let's spend a couple minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so, dabbling with Love, Death, and Robots Season 2. Tim, maybe bring us into this one. How stoked were you for this?
I was super excited because I think this is when you and I really started to click on, like, hey, we've got some pop culture, kind of sentimentalities driving here. And I remember you were super excited about it, and you actually sent me an email, which I had, like, pinned for a couple of days because it was a reference point of, like, hey, watch these. And this is kind of how you and I were operating for a while early on. We did the same thing with Black Mirror. Like, hey, watch these. If you're feeling it, maybe go to these, right? And I think we watched a couple Black Mirror, and then I think we both decided we weren't into it. But with this, you did a full breakdown of, like, hey, these are, like, the 3, 4, 5, like, gotta watch these. These are brilliant. It might have been closer to 3. And then, like, if you really liked those, these are good, these are watchable, these are fun, and then the chunk of, like, these were just dreck. I ended up watching all of them. I think in that order that that you had suggested. They also, Netflix was experimenting with, like, random order viewing too. Yeah. I think of that. So, like, different logins, like, you might get them in a different order than I did. So sort of just kind of played with that. And they were great. I mean, each one was, 8 to maybe 20 minutes at long. I can't remember how long some of those ones went.
Yeah.
Ranging in different topics, all loosely around, sci-fi stuff, love, death, robots. That all kind of fits into each episode.
Right.
But they were so much fun. Different animation style, different story, concise storytelling. Some of them I could take or leave the animation style, but you could see that people were trying different things. There was hyper real, there was super stylized, there was more anime style, there's more computer generated. Some looked like video games that I would have loved to gone back and play through and things like that. And at the end of the day, you could discuss them, and they were fun. And you could talk about the things you didn't like and the 3 you did like. I actually found myself watching one of my favorite ones from that one the other day. Again, was 3 Robots. That one was hilarious.
Love that one.
And I didn't even realize which one I was watching because it started randomly playing on Netflix, and I was like, oh, this isn't one of the good ones. And I was like, oh yeah, it is, like, because it starts totally fakes you out. It has like this much different opening, like 30 seconds than you're expecting. So I was super excited, and we've been waiting for a long time for these. And we knew
2 years.
We knew this was coming 2 years ago, and I really couldn't wait because I feel like they were doing such a good job with these like short vignette storytelling. And even if you didn't like it, it was over in 8 minutes. Move on to the next one. That being said, we both had very high expectations for this season.
Yep, and that was our first mistake.
Yeah.
No, I think you're spot on. And just to put this out there, if anyone's interested, if you haven't seen season 1 and you're curious about this list that I created for Tim, I did do a breakdown on our Instagram of the best, the okay, and the worst of Love, Death, and Robots season 1 months ago. And but it's up there, so if you scroll through our Instagram feed, if you go to the profile page or whatever it is, and you can see all of our posts, you scroll down, you'll see a couple of LDR stuff, and you can see the breakdown that I gave Tim. And you're absolutely right. This is Tim and I had been we worked together at the time. And, we chatted in passing and we chatted a bit and whatever, but this was sort of the first test of our friendship, which when I sent this email, Tim came back and was like, epic, let's do this. Whereas most people would be like, who the hell is this guy who breaks this stuff down so intensely? And that's when I knew. I was like, this is a guy who gets it. We can have these conversations. So with all that, yeah, man, season 2, it really missed the mark. First of all, much shorter.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking like 8 episodes, whereas season 1 was like 18 vignettes.
Had to have been. Yep. It was easily much longer. And really leaving no room for error, to the point that, hey, if you had told me like 6 months after season 1 that like these were the runner-ups, right? Like, these are the ones that didn't make the cut for season 1. Like, these are the B-sides.
Yes, like if this was a bonus content season, like...
Yeah!
Yes.
That would make so much sense. There's argument for 1, maybe 2 of these to replace something in season 1. But I would have been much more okay with you telling me that these were the cast-offs. Like, hey, we had hundreds and hundreds of submissions and we culled them down. That was the best of the best. Here's kind of, runner-up.
To hold you over while we develop season 2 proper.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think that it was... There was, of all 8, there was only 1 that I actually enjoyed. It was All Through the House, the Christmas episode.
It was brilliant.
Loved it. And I think I even texted you. I was like, I just found the one that is good. And even watching, I was like, Tim's going to dig this one.
Yeah.
But I hated every single other one. Now, season 1 got a lot of criticism. A lot. For poor representation of women, misogyny, hypersexualization, and all of this, true. I understand those conversations. I feel like season 2 went hard the other way to try to avoid that.
Yep.
And I get it, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think it also came at the expense of the storytelling. Yeah. The stories themselves were not interesting. There was nothing unique, and I don't mean from season 1. I even mean from each other. There were multiple episodes in season 2 that felt identical to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think about the one where like the vacuum is trying to kill the lady, and then where the robot is trying to kill Michael B. Jordan, right? And it's like these are the exact same stories. All you've done is change the setting and the tone.
Yes.
Right? One is trying to be funny, one is trying to be serious, but it's exactly the same. There were multiple times where you'd be following a narrative, and then in the end, you were like, wait a minute, that doesn't pay off at all.
At all.
Nothing. They just drop whole storylines.
There was a great episode that I thought, I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying this one, where it was a futuristic world where, people can live forever, but if you choose to have kids,
yes,
you weren't really supposed to have kids.
I think that one's called Pop Squad.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what happens, why they killed people who had kids and then subsequently killed the kids. And that's
you start aging
when you have a kid.
Now, I think what I understood was there was a world where, it's population control.
Yeah.
Right? So, you could have children if sanctioned or whatever by the government, but that there were people who were having kids sort of naturally on their own and then hiding, and so they couldn't allow that, right? Those were unsanctioned births.
Yeah.
And apparently some part of the process is if you have kids, then you age, you can no longer be immortal.
So all of that's okay, there's a lot going on here. And you're following the story from the point of view of somebody who goes around killing these illegitimate kids, let's call them, right?
Sure.
Of these illegitimate births. And you're following his story. It's getting good. And then he just gets shot and it's over. And you're like, why did I need to see this story? And that's what I got for most of it. I was like, why was this a story that needed to be told?
Yes.
What was I supposed to learn from this? Where in season 1, I felt like everything was so concise. This is the story. I've got X amount of time, and I told a complete story without introducing too much, without having any so many questions. And there was a good payoff, right? It's like a nice, quick joke. Whereas the setup in all of these, there's so many questions. I have so many questions, and then you just cut the lights out on me.
Every time I got to the end, I never saw a single episode, maybe with the exception of All Through the House, where I craved more.
Yes.
Right? When I think about season 1, Sunny's Edge, I was like, oh, if this was a movie or a series, I would watch it. I want to know more about these people who tap into these monsters. But here's this one person who her consciousness is the monsters. And things it was fascinating. They had proper beginnings, middles, and ends that left you in the end feeling satisfied for the most part. There were 5 or 6 that were on my list of these are awful, which is perhaps the same here, right? 6 or 7 which are awful in season 2. Unfortunately, there's only 7 or 8 episodes. So you only end up with one good one. Whereas at least in season 1, 6 misses out of 18 gives you 12 watchable and 3 to 5 really solid stories.
And again, with that, we also didn't get the depth of animation style, right? I felt like a lot of them trended, at least 3, maybe 4, so almost half were hyper realistic.
Yeah, there's one that looks exactly like Zima Blue. Several of the hyper realistic ones. It's hard to know if they're the same anime, but it's certainly the same style.
Yeah, and to the point where I'm like, did you just do this because you didn't want to pay for real actors? That gets lost on me at that point. Why did you choose animation then? Can't you accomplish the same story within the context of a cooler looking animation? And then even some of the cooler animation ones, the stories were just garbage, and it just didn't do anything. I think what you said is spot on. It's like the Fruit Stripe gum of shows. It's amazing for that short period of time.
Oh, that's
and then you want more, so you pop another piece, right? And you can move on quick. And the only one that really let me wanting another piece was All Through the House. I called you right afterwards, and we spent probably triple the time of the episode talking about that than
a 7-minute short. We probably had a 40-minute conversation about.
Yes. And the rest of them were one-word text, saw it. It's fine.
Meh.
Yeah. The only one that might have been good, was Tall Grass. I think that was the one right before All Through the House.
Had potential.
I liked the animation style.
Yes.
It drew from folklore-esque elements that I was familiar with, but just didn't pay off and just didn't really go anywhere. Just kind of ended. You and I spent a little bit of time talking about that one because I felt like there were ways that you could have made it more interesting or more dramatic, because it had elements in the beginning and then it just petered out.
Yeah. And that one had no death, no robots, and no love. just grass.
Just grass.
Yeah. And weird things. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil them or anything, but look, if you're a fan of season 1, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts were on season 2. I absolutely hated it. I think if you're curious at all, check out season 1, skip season 2, maybe with the exception, and not maybe, I highly recommend the one vignette all through the house. I just think it was clever, it was funny, it was creepy, it was weird, it was twisted. Like, if you're a fan of that kind of just this weird take on such an established folklore and whatever, like, it is just so weird and crazy, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I think hours after we talked, we still had texts going back and forth about, wait, but what about this part?
Yeah,
what happens now?
Like, what about Cole? What about that? Yeah, dude, I'm telling you. And it's the perfect amount of that. It's the perfect amount of, I want to know more, but you also satisfied me in those 7 minutes. It is awesome storytelling. I highly recommend that episode. And then just sit back and wait. We already know season 3 is coming out next year. We don't have to wait 2 years for it. But, I mean, just praying that it's better, because there was something special about season 1. If nothing else, it sparks a lot of conversation. Yep. And that's one of the best things about what we do here. Like, the reason we exist is because this stuff is fun to talk about. Season 2, besides that one episode, not fun to talk about, and I don't recommend it on a whole.
Nope. Speaking of things to talk about, anything else that you've come across in the last couple of weeks?
Yes, sir.
Worth a mention.
Yeah, as we wrap up, I do want to give a shout out to my brother-in-law, Peter, Alyssa's brother. Mm-hmm. I have 2 brothers-in-law, so it's this one.
Yeah.
Peter. And so big shout out to him. He has been hounding me for a while. And it just, with the move and everything, it's been hectic. But he kept calling and saying, you need to watch this show called Made for Love on HBO Max.
Yeah, I saw a trailer for it.
Yeah. So it stars, what's her name? Kristen Milioti?
Yep.
So it's got Kristen Milioti, Ray Romano, and then people that you recognize but don't really know who they are.
Sure.
And so it is, I really don't want to spoil any of it. I will say this. It is, this dude likes some weird stuff. So Peter's responsible for us watching An Evening with Beverly Loughlin. And like he's just in that vein of just really weird stuff. He's a weird dude. And so, who I love to death. But Peter, you know you're weird. And so he recommended this one. I put it on hesitantly one night because I actually had a night and I was like, for Peter to even call me to make a recommendation is a big deal. It's like, he's a quiet guy. So him to really come out and be like, hey, you really need to watch this. I was like, I got to see what this is about. I freaking love it. Yeah. I'm about halfway in. So I can't rate it like for sure yet. So we're gonna kind of do like a Perry Mason thing. This is in progress.
Yep.
I will have it finished before our next, recording, and I'll give a final verdict. But so far, I'm maybe like 5 episodes in or so. It is freaking excellent. If you like, it's, to me, it's in the vein of Upload on Amazon Prime, which we talked about and absolutely loved. It has like a techie sci-fi type element, where stuff that we use day to day, common stuff, that we can all relate to is just sort of taken up a notch, right? Like what if this permeated our lives a little bit deeper? The relationship between her and her dad, played by Ray Romano, is ridiculous. And and it's not even explained. There's a great movie that cracks me up and I love very much. It's called Lars and the Real Girl. Ray Romano is the same. He has a sex doll who is his girlfriend, and so, you know, because his wife is, I don't know if I can't remember if she's dead or gone or whatever, but wife's out of the picture. So now Kristen Milioti is back in the picture and has to navigate this insanity. And just the way the town reacts to that in the same time that you're dealing with her craziness and all the stuff that she's going through. The show is excellent. I don't want to spoil any of it because it opens up like you are in the throes of it and you are learning things as you go. But I just suffices to say it's brilliant. It's brilliantly done. It is hysterically funny. I mean, it's not like you're not going to be like laugh rioting every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But my wife is super into it. Alyssa's been watching it with me and loves it. And that's a huge testament because she doesn't like a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But every episode we watch, we are cracking up from time to time. The story is good so far. It's interesting. It's engaging, and really well acted. Like everyone in the show plays their parts to perfection, and it's a really fun watch. So, Made for Love on HBO Max. I highly recommend it, and but reserving final judgment until I complete it. So the next time we record, I'll have my final verdict on this one.
All right.
But yeah, man, so far, great recommendation. Great recommendation from Peter.
That will go on the list, and we will see where that ends up.
What about you, man? What have you been doing? What's your bonus? Your bonus track?
So a couple weeks ago, I don't know. I have not listened to podcasts at all in the last 5 months now since the baby's been born.
Right.
I have fallen off my podcasts.
Except for this one, right?
Except for this one.
Every night when you go to sleep.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm getting my true crime, my lore, my stuff you should know. I'm not getting any of that. And
right.
At this point now, I feel I'm so weighted down. I don't want to dive back in and figure out. Maybe I'm over it. I don't know. Like that feels now like officially a part of my before life. And so I went down. I went into a little bit of a documentary rabbit hole. And by rabbit hole, I mean like, a 2-inch deep rabbit hole. Cause I watched 2 documentaries, but, I kept hearing this trailer for a documentary on Hulu about whether or not a Bigfoot killed 2 pot farmers up in, the Emerald Triangle in California. And I'm like, I love me some Bigfoot.
Who doesn't?
Back in the day, I had a good thing going with Mary Jane for a while. So I'm kind of like, hey, this is like an intersection of 2 parts of my life. Let's see what this is about. 3 episodes, not a big commitment. Flat out ridiculous. I mean,
what was the giveaway, Tim?
You don't really learn anything except you just are like you learn nothing except what you already knew by the end of it. Okay.
What were you expecting to learn?
Nothing. Literally nothing. And that's why I watched it. I really wanted to learn that a Bigfoot didn't kill anybody, and I'm happy to learn that they didn't. So this guy did this whole 3-part documentary because he apparently is an established journalist, and he's done some work with cartels, and he's done other stuff, and he puts himself undercover. And back in the day, in the early 90s, he was working in California and on a pot farm. And his like 3rd night there, while he's like up at this grow site where they they drive you up there with the hood on so you don't know where you're going, and then you work for a couple of days. These guys bust in and they're like, dude, we were just down at the site, and a Bigfoot killed 2 guys. And apparently it's been eating him up for 30 years that he's like, these guys said a Bigfoot killed 2 people on the pot farm. Well, if you have any sort of idea about the war on drugs and whatnot, that stuff's nasty up in there. Like the illegal pot farms, like are littered with booby traps. You know, federal agents, cops were getting killed and decapitated and seriously hurt by just, you know, you could be walking through the woods up there and stumble on a grow site and, you know, lose a body part because these things are like crudely, booby trapped by Jethro and his cousins up there.
Good Lord.
So it's not a safe environment, but you're also dealing with drug kingpins, right? So then the first episode, he spends all this time like talking to Bigfoot experts, and they're like, "Nah, I never heard of no Bigfoot killing anybody." Pulls in big names.
Bigfoot experts said, "I never heard of no Bigfoots."
Literally.
They're not real.
He talks to all of the major Bigfoot experts in the field. People, if you follow this stuff like I do, you know, the guy who's responsible for the Patterson-Gimlin footage from the 50s. That's like, you know, the one everybody knows where the Bigfoot's walking across the creek in the grainy footage. Talks to that guy. Then the second episode, he's like, maybe it wasn't a real Bigfoot, but I heard that there was a guy up there growing stuff whose name was Bigfoot Gary. So then he spends an episode trying to crack down Bigfoot Gary, only to find out that Bigfoot Gary never lived up there during this time, and Bigfoot Gary never murdered anybody. Only to come back in the third episode and be like, oh yeah, this other drug kingpin, this cartel leader, he killed 2 Mexican guys because the Mexican cartels were sending guys up to take over the pot farms, and they thought a great way to scare them all off was to stage it and make it look like a Bigfoot ripped these 2 guys apart. There you go. I just saved you like 3 episodes of a documentary.
Wow.
Again, I wasn't looking for anything. I was looking for, crap to fill my lunch hour or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Pure ridiculous. Didn't learn anything. The second one I went into was much more interesting. Was about John Wayne Gacy. And this was on Peacock.
Okay.
And you're vaguely familiar with John Wayne Gacy. I think most people do know a little bit about him. You picture him as a clown. All that's a small part of his background. And, he killed and buried young men underneath his house. Super interesting to learn that there is much more to do with this. From the perspective of these filmmakers, they spend a lot of time going over his old interviews and jailhouse interviews, and he sort of admits to some of it, but he doesn't own up to all of it, which is weird for somebody who's been given a death sentence. You're on death row. Why are you being cagey after all these years? There's a very Trump-esque element to him where he's like, I didn't do it, but he says all this strange stuff that makes him sound guilty. A very narcissistic element, maybe. He feels very familiar in that. But what was really fascinating to me was what seems like a giant miscarriage of justice on multiple fronts. This guy was, he was linked to a lot of missing persons cases. You go through these police reports and last seen with John Wayne Gacy, last employed with John Wayne Gacy in multiple things. And the cops never pursued it, until they got some irrefutable evidence. And then they find 30 bodies under this man's house. And then even then, when he goes to jail, the cops never followed up on potential future leads. They kind of like, well, he's in jail. We don't really care if there's more bodies. There's records of the police force in Chicago just saying, we don't want to deal with more bodies. And they made it look like they investigated further, and they didn't. There's also a connection to a larger pedophilia ring where he might have been a low man in a gay sex trafficking cartel. And he might have just been the one to take the fall for it. So it's super fascinating to learn this additional stuff. Again, not the lighter stuff that we were talking about, but definitely aggravating and sheds a lot of light on something that I thought was pretty open and closed. There's another one out there apparently about the son of Sam. And
I did hear about that one.
I was like, it's maybe enough for now. But maybe I'll go back to it. I definitely check out the Gacy one if that's something you want to learn a little bit more about. Like I said, it infuriated me to the point where, he could have been stopped and maybe he wasn't the end of this. The Bigfoot one, if you want to laugh, maybe if you still dancing with Mary Jane and you want to have a good, pizza night with your buddies and laugh hysterical, that's probably what it's made for.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, man. And again, just, further emphasizing that Tim really does need the structure and direction that this podcast offers.
Yes, please.
All right, guys. Well, that pretty much wraps us up for this week. We are so glad to be back, and hopefully you guys are going to enjoy having us back. Next week's episode, we're going to air our previously recorded episode, Tombstone. I don't even remember what we said in it. I don't know if we're going to make references to things that are about 3 months past due.
Maybe.
But it should be interesting. But in either case, it's a movie that I have a rich history with. And so I've been super excited to air that episode and just feel terrible it's taken us so long. So next week will be Tombstone. Other than that, you can find us, as always, on the website, pausereviews.com. You can find this episode exactly where you're listening to it now, or anywhere podcasts are available. We're back on Instagram. We're going to be back at it all week and from now on. So we'll have, reviews coming up there. And you guys seem to really, really like the video content. So moving forward, we're going to try to keep bringing you some of those, which should be fun and interesting. Send us your requests, your recommendations. You can hit us up, do DMs on Instagram. You can shoot us a message on Facebook or wherever. You can shoot us an email, pausereviews@gmail.com. All available to you. But we would love to start diving into some of that stuff, some of our listener requests, and the things that you guys want to hear about. So we're open to all that good stuff. Other than that, we're back on a regular schedule, episodes on Thursdays. We will not be taking any vacations or time off for a while. we have burned that bridge now. So you can look forward to this every Thursday from here until the foreseeable future. Well, until Christmas time when we go on our season break. Other than that, we'll be around. That's it for me, man. Did I hit everything?
Yeah, I think we did that.
We got to get back into the flow of it. So, as always, thank you guys for joining us, and I'm your boy Frank.
This is Tim.
We'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.